Hello everyone and welcome. With today's topic, we are going to be cooking. My name is Francesco, and with this topic 3 that we're going to be covering, we're going to look at how to figure out where to look at, like literally what page to start on of the Ontario Building Code whenever we're analyzing a building. I'm going to show you a method that always works with one exception. And I'll tell you this one exception at the very end because it happens only once and it won't really apply to our course. Okay. But here's what we're doing. Okay. We're cooking today. So I'm going to give you a whole bunch of ingredients, 3 to be exact, that you're going to learn how to put together in order to identify where to start in the Ontario Building Code. And these 3 ingredients are 3 definitions. Okay, if you remember from topic 1, the Ontario Building Code provides definitions for very specific words in the Ontario Building Code, and you can find those in Division A, Article 1.4.1.2. Check out topic 1 if this doesn't sound familiar. The first definition, the first ingredient we're going to start with is building height. If you remember, we looked at building height, and we figured out that the Ontario Building Code does not actually look at the vertical dimension to identify a building's height. Instead, it only looks at the number of stories. So that's why, according to the Ontario Building Code, the pyramids of Giza and the Leaning Tower of Pisa don't actually look like this. Okay? According to the Ontario Building Code, this is what they look like because the Ontario Building Code only looks at the number of stories to identify a building height. And the Leaning Tower of Pisa has 8 stories, whereas the Pyramid of Giza only has 2 stories within it that we know of, okay? But that's important, okay? So the first ingredient we're going to be using is a definition of building height according to the Ontario Building Code. The second ingredient that we're going to be using is building area. Now, building area, according to the Ontario Building Code, you can go check it out and read it, refers to the horizontal area within exterior walls, which kind of makes sense, right? That's a building's area. But it also says that a building area can also be the area enclosed by the exterior walls and the center line of firewalls. And I want to show you what this is meant by the Ontario Building Code. It's for those buildings like this that have a fire separation, that are attached to other buildings. So the walls that are in common between these buildings are the firewalls, right? They're those walls that are specifically built to separate one side from the other so that no fire comes between the two. Now, for weird buildings, so buildings say like this, like the Cayenne Tower in Dubai or the Marilyn Monroe buildings in Mississauga, the absolute world. So buildings that where the shape changes from the first story to the roof, how do you figure out the building area? Because the exterior walls are changing throughout the building. Well, what you do in that case is you use the cookie cutter approach, literally. You pretend that you press the building all the way down into the ground, and the largest area that's pressed into the ground is the building's area. So this is what you would use for weird buildings that are shaped in a funny manner, okay? All right, so that's the second ingredient, building area. The third ingredient is something that we already covered in topic 2, major occupancies, okay? So these are the 3 ingredients that we're going to be using for the purposes of this topic. Now, the major occupancies that I'm listing here is only the top 7. It does not include G major occupancies, so that is agricultural buildings. And that's because for the purposes of this course, we're really not going to play with agricultural buildings. So technically it should be here, but it won't. And that's where the exception is going to come into play. We're really only going to look at these 6 major occupancies, including all the groups and divisions. I should also mention that identifying major occupancies is going to be covered in Homework 1, Question 1. So if you're not sure how to find a major occupancy of this, review topic 2 and then play around with Homework 1, Question 1. It will come into play. If it can help you remember, major occupancies is all about the who and the what of a building. So now that we have these 3 ingredients, how do we use those 3 ingredients to figure out where to start? This becomes important because the 2 volumes of the Ontario Building Code, I mean, that's 3,000 pages between the two of them. As we saw, the Ontario Building Code also is huge. How do you know what page to start on to figure this out? Well, luckily for us, the Ontario Building Code comes to the rescue in the form of this subsection in Division A. Subsection 1.3.3 in Division A, application of Division B. So let me show you where that is. There we go. So here is application of Division B. So basically the contents of this subsection right here, everything that's in under that subsection is the building code's instructions on how to know that Division B of the Ontario Building Code can be used. I'm going to get you to laser focus on 2 articles of this. The first one is this article here, 1.3.3.2, applications of part 3, 4, and 5. There is a lot of stuff under here, lots of sentences, lots of clauses, lots of subclauses. And the other one is application of part 9. There's a little less under here, okay? But the purpose of this get together today is going to be for me to basically translate all of this to show you where to start. Okay, and we're actually going to be focusing specifically on the contents of this article and all of its sentences and all of its clauses. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing together. And the way that this works out is that those 2 articles that we just saw essentially tell you how to identify whether a building can be grouped as a Part 3 building or a Part 9 building. And that's because all of that information that I just showed you under those 2 articles are mutually exclusive. So either you can show that a building becomes a Part 3 building according to Article 1.3.3.2 in Division A, or that building becomes a Part 9 building under Article 1.3.3.3. Okay? I'm going to help you figure that out. Now, there was a lot of information there, so I'm going to be actually zoom in furthermore into giving you the information, which is this. We don't need to use both. We just need to prove that a building is Part 9. If we can prove that a building is Part 9, voila, then we go to Part 9 of Division B of the Ontario Building Code. If we cannot prove that a building is Part 9, automatically it makes it a Part 3 building. That's the beauty of this method. So we only have to learn how to figure out whether a building is Part 9 or not, and that's it. Now, the ingredients for Part 9 are as follows. If you go under Article 1.3.3.3 in Division A, all the sentences and the clauses in there tell you this. In order for a building to be Part 9, it must be no more than 3 stories in height, must have no more than 600 meters squared in building area, and its major occupancies must be C, D, E, F2, or F3. The only exception is that for C major occupancies, this does not account for retirement homes because you have to do a check for that, okay? Now look at this. There is an and here. So what that means is these 3 conditions, all 3 of these conditions will confirm that a building is Part 9. If even one of those conditions does not work, automatically it makes this building a Part 3 building. And that's the beauty of this method, is that you don't have to figure out all the conditions. You might just need to figure out one of them. Okay? So let's do an example. Let's try to figure out whether this building is a Part 3 or a Part 9 building and the reason for it. We're given an apartment building. It's 4 stories in building height, and it has an area of 550 meters squared. So what we would do is we would go to this reference, so that is Article 1.3.3.3 in Division A, to try to prove that that building is Part 9. So we list the 3 ingredients that we have: building height, building area, and major occupancy. Okay? And in order for the 3 ingredients to prove that this building here is Part 9, these are the requirement that all must be met. So let's start with the first one, top to bottom, building height. In order for the building to be Part 9, the building height must be less than 3 stories. Well, right away, this is 4 stories. it's more than that. Automatically, that tells us that this building is not a Part 9 building, and instead it's a Part 3 building. Because of this little and here, we stop right there. We already know that it's not a Part 9 building, it's instead a Part 3 building. So that tells us that we need to go to Part 3 of the Ontario Building Code under Division B to start analyzing this building. That's how this method works. The final answer then would be, this is a Part 3 building since it's more than 3 stories, contrary to the requirements in sentence 1.3.3.3.1 in Division A. Does that make sense? Like I promised you to tell you, there is one exception to this method, and that has to do with G major occupancies, that is agricultural buildings. So farm buildings, basically, okay? When it comes to farm buildings, as soon as you find a farm building, automatically that takes you to Division B Part 2, which is this right here, okay? Do not pass go, do not collect $200, for those of you that are as old as me and know what that means, okay? So this method tells you, this is the one exception to the method of Part 3 versus Part 9. If it's a farm building, you automatically go to Division B Part 2. Hey, I know what that is. It means that our get together is over for this topic. You're ready to do now homework 1, question 3. For our next topic together, we're going to be looking at topic 4, which is going to be about figuring out how many people are going to be using a space, regardless of major occupancy. I'll see you then. Bye.